8:37 a.m., Los Angeles County Courthouse. The judge's gavel hadn't even cooled from its last strike when the entire courtroom fell into a state of frozen disbelief. The anonymous witness had spoken fewer than 100 words, yet the ripple was immediate and irreversible. Judge Miles Radford, a man known for his calm temperament and steady presence even during the most scandalous trial, suddenly straightened in his seat, adjusted his glasses, and, without the typical procedural build-up, declared an emergency recess. His voice didn't tremble, but the words that followed did something worse than shake the air. They changed everything. Based on the sworn testimony of Witness D and the supplementary forensic documentation under Appendix B-27, he said with deliberate weight, this court hereby issues a temporary arrest warrant for Ms. Jennifer Lopez for suspected complicity in premeditated coercion and unlawful surveillance. There was a pause, not even a breath long, before shock cracked the courtroom like lightning. A female juror gasped, her pen sliding off the paper. One of the defense attorneys muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath while fumbling to unlock his phone. Jennifer Lopez herself remained motionless for precisely 2 seconds, still seated in her reserved front row bench, dressed head to toe in black, dark sunglasses masking her gaze. Then her head turned slightly to the left, just enough for the court security cameras to capture the flick of decision in her posture. She rose calmly, took off her sunglasses without a word, turned her phone off as if she'd done it 1,000 times, and walked toward the staff-only exit at the back of the courtroom. The officers stationed nearby were late to react. One moved forward, another fumbled for his radio, but before they could intersect her path, the heavy double doors labeled Staff Only swung open and shut behind her. The clock read 8:40 a.m. Chaos followed. Security scrambled, legal teams erupted in protest, and Judge Radford had to bang his gavel 4 times to restore even a shred of decorum. Outside the courthouse, word spread before anyone from the official press team could verify the facts. By 9:00 a.m., Twitter had exploded with hashtags: #J Lo arrested, #courtroom escape, #justice for Witness D. TMZ had with the headline, Jennifer Lopez flees mid-trial. Is she guilty? While CNN's ticker simply read, breaking arrest warrant issued for Jennifer Lopez in federal court. No one could believe what they were seeing. Jennifer Lopez, the international icon, fashion mogul, Latin trailblazer, and global symbol of empowerment, had just slipped through the cracks of the American judicial system before the judge's ruling had time to land. But what chilled everyone wasn't just the escape, it was the content of the testimony that sparked it. In her encrypted video feed, visible only as a shadowed figure behind a blurred screen, Witness D had stated in a steady but emotionally detached voice, "It was Jennifer Lopez who brought me there, not Diddy. She said it was a private industry event, that I might be considered for a future project. She told me to relax, that everyone there was a friend. She handed me the wine herself." The courtroom had turned glacial. Even the stenographer's fingers hovered above the keys, unsure whether to type or just listen. What made the situation combustible was not only the star power involved, but the sudden pivot in narrative. Until this moment, Jennifer had been tangential to the case, a silent star with peripheral involvement, always maintaining that she had no knowledge of the deeper allegations against Diddy. Her legal team had framed her cooperation as an act of civic duty. She wasn't under suspicion. She was a potential clarifier, a celebrity witness meant to bolster the timeline and perhaps add some prestige to the prosecution's case. That illusion died instantly at 8:37 a.m., when witness D, whose identity remained sealed by federal protection orders, asserted that Jennifer had been the one who opened the door. Not figuratively, literally. She had greeted the victim at the front of the villa in Hidden Hills, had smiled, had handed over a drink, and had led her by the hand into the room where it all began. She knew where the cameras were. She knew about the drugs. "She told me to trust her," the witness said. "She told me the music was just starting, that I should loosen up." The moment those words hit the room, it wasn't just Jennifer Lopez who became suspect. It was the system that allowed her to dance, sing, speak at award shows, launch perfume lines, sign multi-million-dollar Netflix deals, and carry on while this story simmered beneath the surface. Now that story was boiling over, and the courtroom's polished wood and muted tones were no longer a setting of order, but a crucible of reputational implosion. As Jennifer vanished through the court's rear exit, surveillance footage later showed her walking with purpose, not haste. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't ask for help. At 9:02 a.m., she was recorded entering the underground staff corridor, walking past two janitorial staff without a single glance, then emerging through the rear parking garage where a gray SUV without license plates had been idling since 8:30. The driver was masked, gloved, and unidentifiable. In under 40 seconds, the car pulled away, ignoring stop signs, surveillance cameras, and the very concept of legal accountability. She was gone. At 10:12 a.m., the FBI issued a nationwide alert. Jennifer Lopez was now classified as a federal-level person of interest under Class B felony suspicion. The case file expanded. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her scheduled appearances at an upcoming fashion gala in Milan were canceled. Brands that once fought over her image now scrubbed her face from their campaigns. It wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a collapse. Yet, for those inside the courtroom, the moment that would forever be remembered wasn't the escape. It was the seconds before. When the judge announced the arrest warrant, when the words complicity in coercion and unlawful surveillance echoed off the high ceilings, there had been a breathless, crushing silence. A collective recognition that something had shifted, irreversibly. The defense team, particularly the attorneys representing Diddy, didn't even speak. One of them, Harold Renshaw, simply dropped his pen and muttered, "Well, there it is." The air in the courtroom didn't just chill, it congealed, as if every molecule understood the magnitude of what had just happened. One of the most protected names in entertainment was now being reclassified not as a guest, not as a witness, but as an alleged architect of psychological exploitation. Outside, camera crews jostled for position. Protesters began gathering by 11 a.m., some with signs defending J.Lo, others demanding justice. The public was split, but the legal process was not. By 1:45 p.m., Judge Radford issued an internal order. All previous sealed documents involving Jennifer Lopez and the Diddy case were to be reopened, reviewed, and recategorized as high priority under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The statement accompanying the order was brief but devastating. The court recognizes the risk of coordinated evasion and potential organized misconduct involving parties previously considered as non-suspects. As such, Jennifer Lopez shall henceforth be treated as a co-conspirator in this matter. Meanwhile, Inside the secure room where witness D had delivered her account, federal agents reviewed the video over and over again, not because they doubted her words, but because her clarity had reshaped the direction of the case. It was no longer about proving Diddy Combs' guilt. It was about mapping an entire structure of abuse that spanned years, continents, and careers facilitated not only by brute power, but by charm, access, and curated trust. Jennifer Lopez wasn't accused of physical harm. She was accused of being the warm smile that led victims to the door they didn't know would lock behind them. And now, she had disappeared. Her silence screamed louder than any denial could. By the end of the day, June 17th was etched into legal history not only for its shock value, but for the precedents it set. Never before had a celebrity of such global magnitude been issued an arrest warrant mid-trial and evaded capture within minutes. Not for drugs, not for taxes, but for something far darker. Something invisible, insidious, wrapped in pink lighting and designer smiles. The question echoing in every room from the courthouse corridors to the FBI's press war room was no longer, did she know? It had become, unmistakably, how much did she orchestrate? The first chapter had ended, not with a conviction, nor a sentence, but a vanishing. The courtroom had witnessed the moment when a superstar stepped out of the narrative and into the void, taking with her the fragile trust of millions who had once danced to her music, cheered for her underdog story, and believed she stood for something more than fame. But fame doesn't vanish through staff-only doors. Guilty people do. And as the sun set over Los Angeles that day, the brightest spotlight in Hollywood wasn't on a stage. It was in a federal courtroom, illuminating the space where Jennifer Lopez should have been standing. She appeared only as a silhouette behind the blurred digital screen, her voice filtered through multiple layers of encryption, yet each word landed with more force than any headline. No visible tears, no dramatics, just a calm cadence that made the truth unbearable to deny. The court had never heard a voice like this. The woman identified only as Witness D had been granted special protections under the Federal Witness Security Program. Her location was unknown, her appearance shielded, but her voice, her testimony rang out as if it were carved into stone. The only visible movement on the courtroom monitors was the occasional tilt of her head as she breathed through the harder moments, her speech steady but cracked with weight. "I was invited," she said, "not by Diddy Comb, not by one of his assistants, but by someone claiming to work directly with Jennifer Lopez. They said I was being considered for an upcoming music video." She paused, long enough to let the courtroom exhale. "I was told this was a chance to elevate my career, to meet people who mattered. I was young. I was ambitious. I was naive." The lights in the courtroom seemed dimmer, as if the building itself recoiled from what it was hearing. A bailiff fidgeted in the corner. A reporter dropped their notepad. On the defense side, the lead attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Judge Radford did not blink. The woman continued. "The party took place at a villa in Hidden Hills. I remember the gates opening. I remember the long driveway. There were luxury cars, security guards, and music playing low like something out of a dream. And then Jennifer Lopez greeted me at the door." No one spoke. No one coughed. No phones buzzed. She smiled. She told me not to be nervous. She said everyone there was a friend. She handed me a glass of wine and said, "Just enjoy yourself. No pressure." Her voice didn't tremble, but the tremors it sent through the room were undeniable. The first 20 minutes were normal. People mingled. I met some others. I started to feel dizzy. My vision blurred. My body became slow. She paused again. I could still hear, I could still think, but I couldn't move the way I wanted. My legs felt like sandbags. She inhaled sharply, then went on. Jennifer held my arm and said, "Let's get you somewhere quiet." She led me to a room upstairs. The lights were pink. There was a bed with black sheets. I tried to ask what was going on, but my mouth barely worked. I remember being pulled gently by the hand. That was the last thing I remember clearly. At this point, Judge Radford asked the courtroom to remain silent or risk removal. No one dared make a sound. "When I woke up the next morning," she said, "I was in the same room, alone, dressed, but with bruises on my arm and pain that told me something had happened. I left immediately. I didn't tell anyone. I blamed myself." And the footage cut briefly to a document Scan admitted as evidence of the anonymous email she received 7 days later. It contained a 92-second video clip. She said, "It showed me in that room, unresponsive. The video was taken from the corner, like it was meant to watch, not record art. It wasn't security footage, it was something else. In the mirror reflection, I saw her, Jennifer. She was holding a phone." The words felt heavier than any accusation yet made in the entire Diddy case. They weren't about speculation. They were about presence, deliberate, planned presence. "I received messages after that," she said. "Threats, warnings, my mother's address, my sister's school schedule, my travel itinerary. They told me not to speak, or my life would fall apart." The prosecution submitted evidence that confirmed these threats had digital fingerprints. Metadata from the video's origin traced back to a production house previously contracted by Jennifer Lopez in 2021. Financial records showed unreported wire transfers to a shell company with a matching domain ID. The prosecution didn't need to scream. The evidence spoke in whispers that cut deeper than any shout. Witness D sat still. "I thought I could forget it," she admitted. "I thought silence would be enough. But then I saw the same people rising again, more girls like me in the background, and I realized if I stay silent, I'm helping them." Her final words weren't tearful. They were surgical. "Even if I die for speaking up, at least I didn't let them do it again." The judge ordered the feed to be cut. The courtroom was silent for a long time. Jennifer Lopez was gone, but her absence now felt like a statement louder than any denial. The federal agents in the room began whispering among themselves. The stenographer reviewed her typed transcript as if she needed to confirm it was real. Prosecutors adjusted their strategy in real time. The media had already begun rewriting their leads. This was no longer about Diddy alone. It was about a system, a machine, and the smile that greeted victims at the front door. The courtroom reconvened 30 minutes later in an emergency session closed to the public. Judge Radford issued a formal declaration upgrading Jennifer Lopez from witness to person of interest, citing 3 sections of the federal penal code related to entrapment, coercive exploitation, and the unlawful use of surveillance and psychological manipulation. He also ordered full unsealing of Jennifer's previous statements and all documents previously deemed irrelevant. By 4:00 p.m., a sealed document previously ignored in pre-trial phases revealed an internal complaint from 2018 involving a party assistant who had accused Jennifer of overseeing room selection and guest routing at a Diddy hosted event. At the time, it had been dismissed due to lack of corroborating statements. Now it was central. Back in Washington, D.C., the FBI issued an urgent agency memo requesting immediate location tracking, asset freezing, and coordination with private jet registries. Jennifer Lopez had officially become a federal target. Witness D was escorted back into protective custody. Her identity remained protected, but her voice had cracked the shell of celebrity impunity that had long gone untouched. Jennifer's social media accounts went dark. Her legal team issued a brief statement that said only, "We are reviewing the allegations." But no formal denial was given, no rebuttal, just silence. And so the story shifted, not just in headlines, in tone, in consequence. Late-night shows dropped scheduled segments featuring Jennifer. Music platforms began reevaluating curated playlists. Netflix froze production on her biopic. And in boardrooms across Los Angeles, marketers who once used her face as the image of power, beauty, and elegance began quietly removing her from branding decks. But the courtroom remembered. The jurors remembered. The young woman in shadow had spoken not just for herself, but for dozens of unnamed others who had long been too afraid. She didn't ask for justice. She demanded it, and she got it, at least for now. What began as a minor witness statement had shattered the illusion of innocence that surrounded a global star. In under 20 minutes, a titan had been recast as a fugitive. A victim had become the voice that shifted an empire. The judge recessed the courtroom at 6:45 p.m., leaving behind a room that no longer felt like a hall of law but the ground zero of a legal reckoning. The prosecution packed their files, already preparing for what would come next. The defense team scrambled to salvage a strategy that no longer fit the narrative. And somewhere, in some unknown place, Jennifer Lopez was watching the fallout unfold, perhaps in silence, perhaps with others, perhaps already planning her next move. But what she could no longer plan was how to walk back through the same door she had once held open for someone else. That door had closed, and now the world was watching. Before the testimony, before the cameras rolled and the court gasped, before Judge Radford issued an arrest warrant with a solemn tone and a heavy gavel, the name Jennifer Lopez had hovered at the edges of the Diddy investigation like a perfume, faint, elegant, familiar, and entirely disarming. But now, in the hours after Witness D's words carved a permanent fissure through the legal narrative, investigators began peeling back the quiet years. Years of rumors, sealed lawsuits, unexplained withdrawals, hushed settlements, and eerie timing. What emerged wasn't just implication, it was pattern. A cold, deliberate choreography that had played out for more than a decade while the world applauded. The first confirmed connection appeared in a previously overlooked 2015 civil complaint filed in Las Vegas. A server at a private after-party alleged she was drugged and coerced into signing an NDA after being taken into a dimly lit room with two unnamed women. One was described as Latina, early 40s, with distinct tattoos matching those Jennifer Lopez publicly displayed during that period. The complaint had disappeared 2 weeks later. No further media coverage, no legal follow-up. But the timing aligned perfectly with Jennifer's sudden exit from a multi-city promotional tour. At the time, it was attributed to creative exhaustion. Now, it raised questions. The second connection came from 2018. A 94-second video clip was leaked anonymously on a now-defunct Twitter account. The video showed a gathering in what appeared to be a luxury villa resembling Jennifer's estate in Bear. In the frame stood Diddy, a white male later linked to an investor in Lopez's fragrance line, and a woman resembling Jennifer herself, holding a drink and laughing. Within 6 hours of the post, the video vanished. The account was suspended. Copyright takedown notices were issued not by a label, but by Jennifer's personal image rights team. Within 12 hours, blogs discussing the footage began reporting behind-the-scenes legal threats. One writer at a Latin pop culture site claimed his story was pulled mid-upload after his editor received a direct call from a top brand affiliate. Coincidentally, a major magazine cover featuring Jennifer dropped the next day, complete with a glowing write-up that painted her as a survivor, a mogul, and an icon of strength. The story replaced the silence. Then came 2019. A journalist for a major celebrity publication began compiling an expose on Jennifer Lopez's inner circle, her ties to shadow financiers in the industry, her role in guest list curation for elite events, her sudden legal team restructuring. The article, tentatively titled "The Queenmaker," never reached print. Internal memos later obtained by federal investigators revealed that an advertising partner for the magazine had threatened to withdraw $2.3 million in annual sponsorship if the article was published. The piece was shelved. The journalist reassigned. Her original manuscript was eventually found among documents seized from the media agency's backup server. Every paragraph is now in the hands of the FBI. From 2020 to 2022, as the hashtag #MeToo movement amplified voices across Hollywood, not a single public accusation surfaced against Jennifer. Not one. And yet, tip lines managed by nonprofits and advocacy groups received at least 6 separate anonymous statements describing a famous female artist with a pattern of inviting young women into high-end events, getting them comfortable, and then disappearing moments before they were led into isolated rooms. All 6 used the same phrase: "She made me feel like I belonged." None of those reports were followed up due to lack of physical evidence. But the metadata, the dates, the timing, the locations all matched known appearances by Jennifer Lopez at Diddy associated events. Every time such a submission was made, it curiously coincided with a positive PR moment. A charity gala, a documentary premiere, a musical collaboration with an empowerment message. The pattern wasn't just present, it was choreographed. Behind the glittering fad, a web had taken shape. Jennifer had, beginning in 2021, transferred large portions of her personal estate into shell companies based in Barbados, Panama, and Belize. Her luxury vehicles were no longer under her name, but held by trusts controlled by offshore legal firms. Her real estate portfolio was systematically segmented: Miami under one LLC, Puerto Rico under another, and Los Angeles through a layered holding company with 0 public listings. These were not red flags by themselves. Many celebrities did the same, but the timing was notable. All changes occurred within 90 days of the first formal subpoena issued in the Diddy investigation. When asked in a 2022 interview why she was making so many structural shifts, Jennifer smiled softly and said, "I'm entering a quieter phase of my career. I want peace." But peace doesn't usually require forensic accountants. One of the most damning insights came not from an anonymous source, but from a former stage technician who contacted the federal team voluntarily. He had worked on a series of private performances sponsored by a luxury brand in Miami in late 2021. He claimed the venue's backstage was rigged with multiple hidden cameras that were allegedly for creative direction purposes. But when he attempted to remove one during set breakdown, he was told to leave it in place and never speak of it again. The technician ignored the warning and kept the footage. That footage, now in possession of federal authorities, contained silent recordings of guests entering and leaving private areas, none of whom were informed of being filmed. Jennifer Lopez was reportedly present on site. The technician was never hired again after that event. As investigators began layering these threads together, a picture emerged not of a star who was unaware, but of someone who operated at the border between luxury and secrecy. Jennifer wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was the shadow. She was the final yes in a long chain of approvals. She didn't need to coerce anyone. She only needed to invite them. Her fame did the rest. The narrative shifted again. It was no longer whether Jennifer was involved. It was how many others helped her cover it. A whistleblower from her former management firm revealed that in late 2022, Jennifer replaced her entire legal and public relations staff with specialists in crisis management and cyber litigation. She canceled a European tour, citing personal reflection. She purchased a property in the Maldives, one of the few nations without an extradition treaty with the United States. She also changed her email infrastructure, moving all personal communication to encrypted servers managed by a firm previously linked to digital obfuscation services. And then there was the voice. One of the audio files recovered from a technician's hard drive had a timestamp that coincided with a Diddy party in Calabasas. It contained a woman's voice saying, "Let me talk to her privately. I have a way to make her listen." The voice was calm, practiced, almost maternal. An FBI forensic audio analyst compared it to known recordings of Jennifer Lopez. The preliminary match was 83%, high enough to warrant further investigation, high enough to move the public perception needle. The implication wasn't just that Jennifer participated in a culture of coercion. It was that she had been the architect of its trust, the bridge between the girls and the system, the hand that opened the door. Jennifer's sudden disappearance after the court order now looked less like panic and more like preparation. She didn't flee. She executed a plan. One insider put it bluntly. She knew this day was coming. The only question now is, how long has she been getting ready? In Hollywood, brands continued pulling her image. Streaming platforms began hiding her content behind keyword blocks. No one made official statements. They didn't need to. The erasure had begun. One click at a time. But in the courtroom, Jennifer Lopez was more present than ever. Her silence had become evidence. Her past, once curated to perfection, now unraveled in reverse every canceled appearance, every NDAs her team had buried, every glowing headline now a potential mask for something darker. And so the public began asking a new question. If Jennifer Lopez was the one who smiled at the gate, who else stood just inside the room? The deeper investigators dug, the less this case looked like a scandal, and the more it resembled a system, a machinery so polished in its public glow that it had operated for years under the spotlight itself. Jennifer Lopez was no longer merely a name wrapped in suspicion. She was emerging as a keystone, the carefully constructed centerpiece of something far larger than one incident, one testimony, or even one man like Diddy. What Witness D had ignited was not a controversy, it was a reckoning. In the weeks that followed her testimony and Jennifer's sudden disappearance, the FBI shifted its operational model. No longer focused solely on prosecuting Diddy, the team opened what they called the network file, a code name for an investigation into layered rings of influence operating beneath the fade of entertainment galas, charity fundraisers, and private A-list parties. What they found was chilling. 3 former logistics staff, all protected under federal anonymity agreements, came forward. They had worked as event planners, security coordinators, and technical consultants at Diddy associated events between 2018 and 2022. Each described a dual-zone structure at these gatherings. The outer zone was for performance, networking, cameras, and curated spontaneity. But the inner zone, known internally as the Gray Wing, was something else entirely. Phones were confiscated. Doors were soundproofed. No guest could enter without personal invitation and clearance from someone labeled as core. One of those core personnel, all 3 witnesses said, was Jennifer Lopez. Not occasionally, routinely. She arrived early, she stayed late, she didn't just perform. She reviewed attendee lists, had input on guest selection, and was observed checking the digital console of surveillance cameras placed in discreet corners. One former technician recalled a moment in Miami when Jennifer walked into the surveillance control room just as he was troubleshooting an audio bug. She looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, "You didn't see anything, right?" At the time, he laughed nervously and nodded. Now, with the context of the investigation, he submitted an 11-page affidavit detailing what he had seen. Auxiliary camera feeds running independently from the main security system, operated through a laptop, logged in under an admin account tied to a shell company registered in Nassau County, New York. Jennifer Lopez had rented an office there from 2017 to 2020. Officially, she had been working on a creative retreat. Unofficially, it may have been the operational hub of an elaborate guest vetting and surveillance coordination program. But Jennifer didn't act alone. The deeper investigators went, the more layers emerged. The shell companies that received wire transfers from her accounts were not empty entities. They were linked to minor entertainment groups, audio mastering startups, digital production services companies that would have had every reason to be present at high-profile events and every ability to install cameras under the pretense of content creation. Financial records showed a series of recurring payments, all under $9,099, conveniently below mandatory federal reporting thresholds. These payments flowed to accounts linked to 4 states, 3 Caribbean territories, and 2 entities operating out of Luxembourg. One set of payments led to a small drone management company in Arizona, which had previously supplied aerial shots for a JLO music video. That company had also applied for noise suppression patents designed for micro-recording drones. Witnesses described Jennifer as the opener. She had the star power to put people at ease. Girls invited to these parties felt chosen, validated. They posted selfies, tagged the location, bragged online about being welcomed by the woman who once sang about self-worth and empowerment. What they didn't know was that the second layer of the party wasn't about dancing or networking. It was about identification. Soft vetting. Observation. Girls who responded well to flattery, who drank quickly, who stayed when others left, these were marked. They were the ones who received private invitations to continue the night upstairs. And Jennifer, according to testimonies, was often the one who made the offer. Not forcefully, casually, disarmingly. "Why don't you come relax in the quiet room? I think there's someone you should meet." In one of the seized audio files, a voice, now believed to be hers, can be heard saying, "She's ready. Don't overwhelm her, just let it happen naturally." The voice is calm, maternal, dangerous in its precision. The timestamp matches a night where a reported victim was taken from a poolside lounge to a private bedroom inside the villa. That victim never came forward. But her name was on the guest list. and the voice matched the facial footage later analyzed by the FBI from the auxiliary camera system. The most damning testimony came from a former private security contractor hired for 5 separate events. He testified that Jennifer Lopez wasn't just trusted by Diddy Combs' team, she operated as a liaison between the public-facing image of the party and the technical back end. She handled things only the star could, like putting a hand on a guest's shoulder and saying, "Don't worry, everyone here is safe," or instructing staff to avoid recording certain rooms because we want them to feel like home. The contractor said he thought it was just celebrity eccentricity. Now he realized it was architectural control. Not all the parties were hosted by Diddy Comb. In fact, several were held under the names of small entertainment affiliates, funded through obscure grants and art residencies. But the same patterns repeated, the same core personnel, the same dual-layered layouts, the same surveillance tech. Jennifer was always present, and she was always smiling. What terrified the investigators the most wasn't the scale. It was the elegance, the seamlessness of it. There was no force, no visible coercion, just lighting, music, familiarity, and the subtle shift of environment. Like a script written by someone who knew exactly how far trust could stretch before it snapped. Jennifer Lopez, the face of Latin pride, the embodiment of success through hard work, was now being reimagined through the cold logic of evidence. A woman who had spent decades saying, "I am more than what you see," now seen more than ever before, and nothing looked like the image she had built. At the federal press briefing on July 6th, the lead investigator did not mince words. This is not just about one celebrity. This is about a culture of access weaponized through charm. And we now believe Miss Lopez was not outside that system. She was integral to its function. The arrest warrant had expanded. Jennifer was no longer just a suspect. She was now classified as a central figure in a psychological manipulation ring involving high-profile individuals, hidden surveillance, coercive environments, and digital blackmail. Her role, they concluded, was to make the unacceptable feel safe. The terrifying part was how effective she had been. And still, she remained missing. Every day she stayed in the wind, her silence grew heavier. Every contract canceled, every brand dropped out, every artist who quietly untagged her name each was a silent verdict. Not of guilt, but of trust lost. What began as a courtroom twist had become a full-blown collapse, not just of a public figure, but of a mythology. Jennifer Lopez wasn't just running from the law. She was running from the image she had built, and perhaps from the woman she had become in the process. But the door she once held open for others had closed behind her. Now there was nowhere left to hide.